Good Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. We're excited to have people back in the building, and we're doubly excited because a good friend, Toria Stark, is joining us online, and those who are joining online will be able to see Toria and hear her sing, and those of us here in the building will hear her sing. We met Toria 2.5 years ago as a function of this crazy COVID. Rabbi Scott Kramer of the Ahavas Chesed Synagogue established a virtual Havdalah, and Toria joined that. And she's an incredible woman, very giving of spirit and of heart, and a talented and beautiful singer, and she's studying to be a chazan, and we're delighted that she's joining us. And we thank our anonymous benefactor who's made this happen. And we're also excited that members of Agudath Israel Tzachayim from Montgomery are joining in. So we'll begin in a moment. You may have a talis at home, and if you want to say the bracha, we invite you to say the bracha along with me. It's Lehita Teif B'tzitzit. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Lehita Teif B'tzitzit. Shabbat Shalom. Toria, are you here?
I'm here. Shabbat Shalom.
We're very excited that Toria is joining us. Thank you very much. You want to say a little greeting? Toria, can you maybe offer a greeting, just a hello?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Delighted to join you from Auburn, and just thrilled to be able to enjoy Shabbat with you and to daven with you all. As Rabbi Silverman said, I'm studying to be a cantor through the Academy for Jewish Religion, based out of New York. And so I'm just delighted to be here. And through the magic of the wonders of technology, we're able to daven together this morning.
Today, Rabbi Toria, we'll begin with the Ma Tovu on page 101.
Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Yisrael, join me. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Yisrael.
We rise, turning to pages 103 and 104, Birchot HaShachar, pages 103 and 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'ivina lahavchin ben yom u'ben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Top of 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asa likol tzarki. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layoev koach. וננו היום ובכל יום לכנו חסד רחמים בעיניך ובעיני חברינו ותגמלנו חסדים טובים ברוך אתה אדוני כל מלך שמוע ישראל. And as we were seated, we turn now to page 112, the Psalm for Shabbat, the Mizmor, the Tehillah, the Psalm for Shabbat on page 112.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age, they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw. The last stanza, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach in the Hebrew.
Tzadik Katamar Yifrach Ke'erez Balvanon Yizger Shetulim Beveit Adonai Bechatrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Vera'ananim Iyu Lehagid Yashar Adonai Suri Velo Avlatabu.
Baruch Shamar, page 122. Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh v'reshit Baruch Omer v'oseh Baruch Gozer Umekayim Baruch Mirachem Al Haaretz Baruch Mirachem Al Habriot Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov L'Reov Baruch Chailad V'Kayom Lo Netzach Baruch Podeh Umatzil Baruch Shemo. On the English of 122, the bottommost stanza. The singular one who gives life to the world, the sovereign who is praised and glorified forever and ever, this is your great name. Baruch atah Adonai, sovereign, celebrated with songs of praise. Yochid Chayol Amim, Melech Mishbach Mufawar, Adei Shmo Hagadol, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech Mulobatish Bachot. And as we leave the Baruch Shamar, we now enter a section that's called Pesukei de Zimra, literally verses of singing, verses of song. The next few pages are a compilation of different phrases from different parts of the Bible. And on page 127, we begin a series of psalms, religious songs and poems. Toria, will you lead us in the last line on 127? The last line on 127, Yihiyu l'ratzonim refi, may the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O God.
I'd love to. This is a setting by Michelle Citrin that really speaks to me and incorporates some English. Yihiyu l'ratzonim refi v'hagyon libi Yihiyu l'ratzonim refi v'hagyon libi lefanecha Adonai Tzuri Adonai Tzuri v'goali Adonai Tzuri Adonai Tzuri v'goali. Go inside your heart, just be. Go inside your heart and see what it wants, what it needs, what it yearns when you breathe. Go inside your heart and see. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be kind, be true. May they be acceptable to you, O my rock, my rock and my redeemer. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai.
The center of page 128 on the English side, 2 small stanzas above the little red transliterated ink. Come, children, listen to me. I'll teach you to revere Adonai. Who is the person who desires life, loving what is good all one's days? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. According to this psalm, Psalm 34, the doorway into removing evil from the world is to guard one's tongue. The doorway of bringing peace into the entire world is opened when each one of us protects his tongue, protects her tongue from being an instrument of harsh words. On page 136, page 136, you know that I am traditional and bound to our patterns and our framework, but today I'm letting go just a little bit. Today is Ashrei with Turia's presentation. It's a little bit different, but we're opening our minds and our hearts to words, to spirit, to melody. Turia?
I invite you to sing after me. Ashrei, Ashrei, Yoshvei, Yoshvei, Vetecha. Odia hallelujah, Odia hallelujah, Selah. Ashrei, Ashrei, Yoshvei, Vetecha. Odia hallelujah, Odia hallelujah, Selah. Tehilat Adonai daber pi, v'yivarek Hashem kodsho leolam va'ed, v'anachnu nevarech ya, me'atav yahar olam, hallelujah.
And now at the top of page 141 in the Siddur, the top of page 141.
Yai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekasho, hallelujah, Bekiyazo, hallelujah,
Hallelujah, Kirov, Guhudo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Shabbat,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah, hallelujah.
Shabbat, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kol Shema, every living soul, Kol Shema, every breath. And now turning to page 143. You see on page 143 the Azya Shir. Azya Shir is a poem. And we're approaching in our mind and in our calendar because next week is Pesach. We're approaching this, which symbolically is the journey forward every single day. The Azya Shir is in the Siddur every single day of the year, instructing us literally as we get up every single morning and are about to walk out into the world to see every single day as a step forward into a promise that you and I are going to bring into fulfillment by leaving slavery behind. That's why Azya Shir is in the Siddur every single day. It's the song that the people of Israel burst forth spontaneously after the Egyptian army was swallowed up in the sea, and they were now standing on the edge moving forward into a future that they were going to make. And there's a song that I've asked Toya to sing. It's the third line down. It's the last 5 words, Ozi v'zimratya pa'hili lishua, which literally means, God is my strength and my power. God is my deliverance.
Ozi v'zimratya Vayehili lishua Uzi v'zimratya Vayehili lishua v'zimratya vayehili lishua.
On page 144, there's a marginal note on the left side of the page, 144 on the English side, dancing with timbrels. The righteous women of that generation had faith that the Blessed Holy One would perform miracles for them. So they brought timbrels with them from Egypt to be able to sing and dance. They were anticipating there'd be a chance for them to sing, so they made preparations. And we are blessed to have Turia joining with us on this Shabbat, Shabbat Hagadol, leading us in song and in prayer. On page 147, Shochen Ad, it's the first red arrow near the top of the page, page 147. Shochen Ad is a poetic introduction to this mystical theme that angels are surrounding God, and angels are singing out to God at every moment of all creation. On Shabbat, you and I open our ears and we can hear the voices of the angels singing in the celestial realm, and we are invited to sing along. Shochen Ad.
Shochen Ad Marom V'kadosh Shemo V'chatuv ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai la'yesharim nava tehila B'fi sharim titalal uv'divrei tzadikim titbarach uv'irshon chasidim titromam uv'kerev kedoshim titkadash Kalot revivot amcha bet Yisrael Sheken chovat kol hayetzurim lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotinu ve'imotenu leodot לשבח, לפעל, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולקלס. על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות. דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך.
The top of 148. Yishtabach Shimcha Lon Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VeHaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Ki Lecha Noel Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu V'Imotenu Shir U'Shvacha Halel V'Zimra Oz U'Memshala Netzah Gedula U'Gvura Tehila V'Tiferet Kiddusha U'Malchut Brachot V'Horot Me'ata V'Ad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai El Melech Gadol B'Tishbachot El Ha'odot Adonai Niflot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech Elchei Olamim. We rise the bracha, the Birkat Yotzir, or the top of page 150, in the Hebrew and the English, the opening bracha of Shacharit, page 150. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Yotzer or borei choshech, oseh shalom, uborei et hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, forming light and creating darkness, bringing harm, creating all. And we are seated. And if you skim pages 151, poetry, and 152, poetry, speaking of the beauty of creation, the glory of light, and on page 153, returning to that original element that we saw in the Shabbat, the idea that the angels are celebrating next to God is found here on page 153. And Turya is leading us here near the bottom of page 153, or Chadash. Okay.
Or Chadash HaTzion Ta'ir V'nizkechu lanu Mehera le'oro.
On page 154, the first paragraph on the English side. You've loved us deeply, Adonai, our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you, and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us. Open our hearts so that we may understand, and with love, discern, hear, and study, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah. Attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope. As we trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name, we will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. Those wearing talit are invited to gather the four corners together. And as we gather the four corners, remind ourselves that every Jew has a responsibility to reach out to another Jewish person. Every Jew has a responsibility to support and extend a hand to someone else. And when we gather these four corners together, we're gathering ourselves. Thus, we're embodying the Shema itself in physical and tangible ways. V'habienu, Turya.
V'habienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot ha'aretz v'tolichenu kol memiud le'artzenu ki el po'el yeshuat ata uvanu v'acharta mikol am velashon v'keraftan l'shimcha gadol sela behemet lehodot lecha ulechetcha be'ahava baruch atah Adonai haboche be'amo Yisrael be'ava.
Amen. Page 155, Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
The middle of page 156, Vayomer. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, Taber el bnei Yisrael v'marta aleim, v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdeihem l'doratam, v'nanu al tzitzit hakana p'til techelet, v'yalachem l'tzitzit, uritem oto, u'zchartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, v'asitem otam, v'lo taturu acharei levavchem yacharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, l'man tizkeru, v'asitem et kol mitzvot hai, v'item kerushim le'elohechem, ani Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem eretz Mitzrayim, lihiyot lachem le'elohim, ani Eloi Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet. On page 157 on the English side, prior to the Milchamocha, the lower half of the page on 157, you are always the help of our ancestors, a shield and deliverer for their descendants in every generation. You abide at the pinnacle of the universe. Your judgment and your righteousness extend to the ends of the earth. Blessed are the ones who attend to your mitzvot and place your teaching and words on their hearts. Truly you are the ruler of your people, a mighty sovereign who takes up their cause. Truly you are at the beginning, you will be at the end. Aside from you, we have no ruler who can redeem and deliver. The Milchamocha in the center of page 158.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehedar b'kodesh, norat tehilot osei feleh, norat tehilot osei feleh. Shira chadasha shivhu ge'ulim, lishimcha asfatayam, yachad kulam hodu, vehilichu ve'amru, Adonai no le'olam va'ed, Adonai no le'olam va'ed. Sur Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Uvdechi Numecha, Yehuda veYisrael. Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, Kadosh Yisrael. Baruch Atah Adonai, Ya'am Yisrael.
Beginning aloud on pages 159, 60, and Kedusha on 161. Thereafter, a few moments of silence, concluding on page 166, or fashioning a silent prayer of one's own. Baruch. Victoria? Victoria?
Ta Adonai, Eloheinu, Velohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Velohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, וקונה הכל, וזוכה חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומדום מלוך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצליח ישועה. ונאמרת להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב ויענוויך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך הארץ כבודו, אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול, מתנשאים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך ברא ממקומו, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתגרש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי מעוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. ימלוך עלי לעולם אל הר ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גדלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. In just a moment, the full Kaddish on page 167. Some are still concluding their private davening. We will wait another moment. The Kaddish Shalem in a moment on page 167. Yes, page 167, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
מה דברה חירותי והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, וגאלו בזמן קריב ואימרו.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה.
ברכו.
ואלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ואימרו.
אמן.
יתקבל צלותון ובאותון לכל ישראל, קדם אבוהון דבישמיה ואימרו.
אמן.
ויהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואימרו. אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
On page 168, beginning the Torah service with Ein Kamocha. En kamocha Elohim Adonai, v'en kamasecha, malchutecha malchut, kol olamim, hamemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimlach, le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz le'amo yitem, Adonai yevarech, et amo v'shalom, av harachamim, heitiv avertzoncha, et Zion. Tibnei chamot Yerushalayim, Tibnei chamot Yerushalayim, Kivecha levad b'tachnu, Melech el ram v'nisav, Adon olamim. Vayehi bin Soa ha'aron, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, ve'afutzu oivecham, ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, udevar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah, Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Ribono Shel Olam, the community here is gathered, and through the hope, the presence of this minyan, the doors to the Aron HaKodesh are now open, and shared prayers and individual hopes are pouring into this Aron HaKodesh directed to you, B'Yeshiva Shalmala, in the heavenly sphere. Almighty God, source of courage and resolve, continue to strengthen the spirit of all who are fighting for a free Ukraine, and for all who are nurturing and supporting the victims of war crimes. Bring your sheltering presence to the homeless, the terrified, the lonely, the sick, and to those who have separated from their families. Uplift the caregivers, the volunteers, the emergency responders, the workers of governments, the emissaries of tzedakah, and all who are united in love and care for the innocent ones. Protect the innocents. Guard all in need of care. Bring shalom to all, in mind and spirit. Bring rest to the exhausted and hope to the frightened. Bring about a new understanding for the attackers, that they cease attacking and brutalizing the innocents. We call forth this prayer from united and broken hearts, and we all say, Amen. the bottom of page 171. Be'on harochetz v'lishmei kadisha yakira ono emar tushbechon be'on harochetz v'lishmei kadisha yakira ono emar tushbechon Yehera avakadomoch Tiftach libi v'yoraita V'tashli mishalin t'libi V'liba dechol amoch Yisrael Letavo lechayin v'lishlam Amen. For those following along on the Siddur, page 171.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Arnoiti Ramama Shmo Yachtov L'cha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura V'Tiferet V'Hanetzach V'Hahod Kichol B'Shamayim U'Varetz Kichol B'Shamayim U'Varetz Adonai Hamamlocha V'Amin Naseh L'Chol Rosh Ramimo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu La'adam Raglav Kadoshu Ramimo Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'har Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We are seated, and we will begin our Torah service in just a moment. And those joining in at home are invited to join along with us. If you have a Chumash, Eitz Chaim, we're on page 666. If you're following along in the Tanakh, we're in the book of Leviticus. It's Leviticus chapter number 15, Vayikra chapter number 15. I think we have we presume we have a minyan. I think we have a minyan. Okay. For those joining in at home, it's our practice that when we have a minyan of Jewish people in the building, we read Torah and we have aliyot, and those joining in have the opportunity to, perhaps if they're seeing or listening, see Torah being read and hear Torah being read. So we're in Vayikra, and Vayikra is the third volume of the Torah. Vayikra is very difficult for me to fully appreciate and take hold of. We might consider Vayikra a guide for the Kohanim, the ancient priests. Page 666. For 1,300 years, this system operated. For 1,300 years, every single aspect of daily life for the entire Israelite nation was conducted in accordance with priestly rules of protocol and proper comportment. It was beyond their comprehension that people would wish to be away from the tabernacle and temple. That was incomprehensible. The entire goal of every Israelite, from the Kohanim and the Levian point of view, was that all of us would, in one way or another, in our only daily schedules and cycles of life, would be able to come to the temple or the tabernacle. No ifs, ands, or buts. From the Kohanic point of view, if and when somebody came in contact with a deceased person, then he or she was temporarily suspended from coming to the tabernacle or the temple. And we've talked about that in a number of other contexts. Here, this section, which is known as the Parsha of Mitzorah, brings to the discussion another element. In the event that people had certain discharges of bodily fluids, then temporarily they were going to be suspended from coming to the tabernacle or the temple. And in order to, as quickly as possible, bring people back into the sacred community, a certain protocol was followed. And that's what is somewhat laid out here on page 666 and 667 and so on. Once the tabernacle ceased functioning, and then the temple operated for 1,000 years. And when the temple itself ceased to operate, because of course Rome destroyed it in the year 70, effectively these rules ceased. Many still today look at these rules and try to look inside the rules, and instead of looking only at, gosh, he or she might be impure, the challenge for us is, what does it mean when something happens with our bodies? Perhaps in a routine way, perhaps on a non-routine way. And in some way, does that affect how we see ourselves within the community and also approaching God? When I think of it in those terms, it's not quite as startling and striking. How do I appreciate what happens to my body? And in some way, is there an access point to trying to come closer to a sense of wholeness? Perhaps. But I must say, it's still very challenging for me. But it's in Torah, and so we read it, and we study it, and we struggle with it. The first aliyah is on page 666, verse number 15. Moshe Hirsch, may I call you up?
Baruch Adonai Baruch
Baruch and Baruch Lam Boed.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baruch abanu mikol ha'amim lanos alanu estor aso Baruch Atah Adonai nosein Torah.
Amen. Vaydaber Adonai Moshe V'el Aaron lemor Dabru el bnei Yisrael v'martem alehem ish ish Ki ezah mibsaro zo tamehu V'zo tieh tumato b'savo rar b'saro Et zovo echtim b'saro mizavo tumato hi Kol mishkav asher yishkav alav hazav yitma Kol kli asher yishev alav yitma
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher nasa lanu Torah semes v'chayei olam notah b'sochenu Baruch atah Adonai noseinu Torah.
Amen. Katie, may I call you up? Tamon, getting on verse number 5, but I'm looking at verse number 7. And I'm not really talking about how body and discharge. I want to look at the asterisk in the Hebrew. If you look at verse number 7 in the Hebrew text, next to the number 7, there's a little asterisk next to the Hebrew letter Vav, Vanogea. And that little asterisk, number 7, takes you down to the lower portion of the page, and you hopefully see the very last line of Hebrew, which reads, Uva lifnei Adonai Petach Moed. And then you see a V7 in small print with 3 Hebrew words. Do you see that? It's very small print. Should be bigger. And again, I've complained about this before, but I wasn't on the committee. Nobody called me when they were editing the final book together. But this V7, verse 7 is Chatzi HaSefer B'Psukim. This is the middle of the book of Leviticus, if you count verses. Golly jeepers. Leon, would you spend your time, I don't think I would, counting every single verse in the book of the Torah, remembering where you were, stopping, and then double-checking and going backwards and forwards? I'm not that... Torah trivia. So, chapter 15, verse number 7 is the exact middle in the book of Leviticus. And
Done in each book?
It is done in each book. And in fact, we have come across it, and every time I see it, I point it out. So, what does that bring to our thoughts? That there were ancestors in the ancient days who were so beloved of Torah and loving of Torah, so devoted to Torah, that they counted every single, literally, word and verse and even letter. And those countings have been handed down and preserved, and they're recorded in our books. It means that even when some of the material is challenging or confusing or off-putting or a struggle, overall, the message of Torah is that this is the word that is the interplay and the interchange between God and our people. And for 100 generations or more, you and I have been hearing the echoes of these words. That's what it means. And the next element is that how will you and I contribute to the ongoing transmission of these words so that the next generations will hear these words through the echoes of our voices?
There has to be some significance if it's in the 5 books and it's 50% or halfway through. Why not a quarter? 50 and 75.
Oh, I don't know.
What? No, I mean, what is the significance? You're halfway there.
I think they're just interested in you're halfway there, or it's maybe it's like Kitty said, like Torah trivia, half full. Maybe like you said, Torah trivia.
These were the Torah accountants.
These are the Torah accountants. These were the Torah. You're right, kid. These are the Torah accountants. You're Katie, that's a great line. These are the Torah accountants. That's the best answer. That's better than mine. There.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak Le'olam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. איש שיגע במשכבו יכבס בגדיו רחץ מים וטמא ערב ויושב על הכלי אשר יושב עליו הזהב יכבס בגדיו רחץ מים וטמא ערב ונוגע בבשר הזהב יכבס בגדיו רחץ במים וטמא ערב.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam v'tikenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
I think this was their most prized possession. They knew it inside and out.
This was the most prized possession. Thank you, Katie. They knew it in and out, and we're still learning, still struggling, and asking questions. Devorah, may I call you up? Tamo Devorah ba Yosef b'tovalea l'shlishi. And the phrase Ad Ha'arev continues and recurs in every little section. Arev is like Erev, evening time. So evidently for those people who had some kind of a discharge, they had to temporarily suspend themselves, remove themselves from the community, and then bathe and change clothing and wash their clothing. And then at evening time, they could come back. Now, think about what you and I know from the Torah point of view. When you hear evening as a repetitious, evening as a repetitious cycle, does anything come to mind? It's a new day. It's a brand new day, and all of us want to start off with a brand new day, a new sense of wholeness, renewed wholeness as an individual between the self and the self, between the self and other people, between the self and God. So although the element here is really very strange and I don't get it and it's not part of my life, I can strive to see myself as being renewed every evening because I want to put myself into the community with a sense of wholeness. And I want to interact with my community with a sense of renewed wholeness every single day.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed.
Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. V'chiro kazal b'tohor v'chibes b'gadav v'chasmayim v'tamei ha'arev chol merkav shri kabalav azav yitma b'chol anogea b'chol esheyeh tachtav v'yitma ha'arev v'nosotam yichabes b'gadav v'chasmayim v'tamei ha'arev chol sheiga bo hazav v'yirav lo shetaf b'mayim v'chibes b'gadav v'chasmayim v'tamei ha'arev chol cheres sheiga bo hazav Yishaver, Chol Kli Eitz Yishatef, B'mayim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Larry, may I call you up? Larry, what's your name? Yamo Leben Moshe. And your mother's name? Yamo Leben Moshe B'Tzipora Levi. Beginning verse number 13. Allow me a second just to turn the Torah just a bit.
Baruch hu Adonai Hamvorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baka panav mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'chitar zav mizobo v'sfar lo shivat yamim l'torato v'chibes v'gadav v'chsmayim v'tamero v'mayim chayim v'tohar v'yom hashmini kach l'shtei turim v'shnei v'noina v'alpnei Adonai petak l'el moed ranam el kohen v'asotam al kohen echad chatat v'echad ha'echad olah v'chibir alav kohen l'pnei Adonai mizobo v'ish ki tetzei mimenu shivat zera v'chatmayim et kol b'saro v'tamei et arev kol beged v'chol or she'elav shechvat zera v'chibas malayim v'tamei et arev v'isha she'ishka v'ish ita shechvat zera v'chatmayim v'tamu ad ha'arev.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayehu lanu v'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Have a candy. Good day. Good Shabbat. Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi'i. Are we at Chamishi now? Which Aliyah are we on? We're in 5, right? See, I can never count past 4. Thank you, Deborah. I just, for some reason, I have a mental block past 4. Dan's out of town, so I mean, just I lose it. Okay. Murray, may I call you up? What's your name, Murray? Yamo Moshe Ben Yona. What's your mama's name? Chana Hamishi. Leon, you're on deck. Okay, Leon, you're on deck. Good. Okay. So, Murray, here, take your dollars. And Aliyah is going to be verse number 19 on page 668. Right there.
Baruch Adonai Barak.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Boed.
Adonai Barak L'olam Boed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baka panav mikol hamim v'natan et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Over you go. Ve'isha ki tiyeh zava, dam yeh zava b'sora, shivat yamim tiyeh b'nitah, v'chol nogea b'yitma ad ha'arev, v'chol asher tishkav alav b'nidata yitma, v'chol asher teshev alav yitma, v'chol nogea b'mishkava yichabes b'gedav v'smayim v'tamei ad ha'arev, v'chol nogea b'chol kli asher teshev alav yichabes b'gedav v'smayim v'tamei ad ha'arev, v'yimol mishkav al ha-kli asher hi yoshevet alav b'nigalovo yitmar ha'arev v'imshachad yishkav ish ota u'tinidata alav b'tamei shivat yamim kol mishkav asher yishkav alav yitmar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayehu lanu v'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Have a candy. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shkoyach. You stand right here. You stand right here. Stand over here. Yamod Aryaleib Ben David Bachale Shvi So as Katie said before, there were Torah accountants, and as you can see, ich bin nicht ein accountant, right, Devorah? Numbers are not my, letters I can do, numbers I can't. So.
I might have an idea for that seven.
I'm ready.
Remember, they didn't number or punctuate the Torah.
Exactly.
And it gave them some sort of bearing of where they were.
Now, so Leanne's pointing out why that sentence is counted and stands out as the center, which makes sense. However, the problem, well, I can't say the problem, but something to observe or to note, and we've all seen Torah scrolls. In some locations, there are paragraphs. In some locations, there are columns. And it's a straight column. So for example, here, this is a straight column, no paragraph. Right. And frankly, it's hard for me to find my place there, but we're here, so I know my place here. But that sentence that we found, which is the exact middle, is right there. And it is not demarcated as separated visually from the rest of the paragraphs. Now, here's the other point, and I did not know this. When I was a child, and perhaps you heard the same thing, and we've all grown up hearing that every Torah is the same, and that's true, all the words are the same. However, some Torahs are taller, some Torahs are shorter, right? So since some Torahs are taller, the column in a taller parchment has more words and more lines. So if you had your GPS coordinate and you were at, let's say, section 5, paragraph 12 or whatever, in a longer Torah, the word would be here, and in a shorter Torah, the word would be here. They're not laid up, they're not outlined every single line of the way. There might be 50 lines of text on one Torah and 70 lines of text on another Torah. So it's not the case that every word is in the same exact coordinated spot as every other Torah. You understand? I learned that recently. I learned that about maybe 10, 12 years ago. We had some sofrim, some scribes come to the shul, and they checked and repaired and cleaned all of our Torahs. And one of the sofer is a scribe, sofer. One of the sofrim told me this, and I did not know that. And evidently, and of course he's the expert because that's what he studies, evidently there are, we would say, like family patterns of Torahs. So for example, there is a pattern of Torah that comes from, we now call it the Czech Republic, Bohemia, Moravia. There's a family style of Torahs, and there was a certain style as to how many lines were on Bohemian and Moravian Torahs, and how many lines there were on, let's say, Russian Torahs going back hundreds of years, or Spanish Torahs. And so there seemed to be, we would call them family styles or patterns, which means that local communities had developed the tradition of writing in Torah with X number of lines in a column. Still the same words as every Torah around the world, but the layout or the positioning is different. So, anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome. More Torah trivia. Yes, sir.
There's only one Torah read in Shabbat. How do you determine which Torah? Because normally it's the blue cover.
Yes.
But why not another cover?
I use this Torah because, frankly, it's the smallest and the most lightweight, and it's easiest to carry and easiest to do Hagbah. The other Torahs are obviously kosher, and we can certainly lift them, but all the weight for Hagbah is on your wrist. And if you've got 30 or 40 pounds on your wrists, it's heavy. And if a Torah is rolled to one side, you've got 35 or 40 pounds or more on one wrist and 8, 10 pounds on another wrist. It's hard. I cannot do it. I mean, that's a John Webster sacred task. John can do it, God bless. But some of these Torahs are very heavy. And so for convenience, we use the smaller one.
I have a question from before I didn't ask you. When it say if a person touches a diseased person or
right,
whatever, you can wash your hands with water.
Right.
I mean, nowadays, you don't just use water. I mean, in those days, according to the Torah, water was good.
Water was good. Water is life-giving. So, and I want to throw out one other thing, which for me it's a symbolic idea. But now go back to the beginning of Torah. What is the first experience that we see of water? At the beginning of Torah, what's the first experience we see?
Breshit.
Breshit. And what do we see of the experience of water in the book of Breshit? No, before that, early beginning. Yeah, okay, there's chaos, there's no order whatsoever, and then what does God do? God separates the chaos into components of beauty and order. And there becomes energy, that's light, that's energy, and then there's matter. And the matter that's differentiated is earth and water. And then the waters are separated and organized and made into or gathered into oceans and seas and lakes and rivers, etc. So water is the life-giving need and material and substance which sustains us, but it's also a reminder of how chaos was separated out and organized, and we live in a beautiful world created by God. I think about that anytime I'm approaching the ideas of, it's called Tuma and Tahara, or what we use the term mikvah, which comes out of the idea of Breshit, Genesis chapter 2, 1.5, late 1, early 2. So when this person is washing, he or she would go to what we now call a mikvah. It may not be mentioned specifically, but that's what we're talking about. And most of the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, is guiding average Israelites to go to a mikvah, and also on certain occasions guiding the Kohen and the Levi to go to the mikvah when necessary. And this is all next, we have to go on, but the next issue is, or the item is, we in this modern world, 2,000 years after the temple was destroyed, have become accustomed to not really thinking about mikvah. And I personally wish that we were a bit more focused or attentive to the idea of mikvah. Mikvah can be a very powerful idea, and there are many different ways that people can access mikvah. So if we don't actually have a mikvah, which is the case here in Mobile, we don't have one accessible to us, but we have access to, let's say, lakes or ponds or ocean. If we were to take hold of this idea of going to water and submerging ourselves in water for a brief moment to reunite our internal mind and our being with the creator of the universe, we might find something, we might unearth something. Oh, pun intended, we might unearth. I did that on purpose, really. We might unearth something. That's what Vayikra is challenging us to do. How do we re-engage with the world that gave us life? Remember, what our bodies are, how many percentage water?
A lot.
A lot. So that's who we are.
Mostly clean water, right?
Oh, yeah, clean water. Yeah, clean water. So, but when it says wash, 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 we're not talking about turning on the tap. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a person would go to the mikvah. That's what's going on here.
They didn't have taps.
They didn't have taps back then.
I mean,
they went to a communal
had to
bath.
go to a
They went to a mikvah. They went to a bath, a communal bath that everybody shared.
So I'm wondering if, we're doing that showering and everything in modern times. So maybe there's, that's why I say the Torah is dynamic, not static.
Exactly, thank you. Right, the Torah is dynamic. So now we as, one more time, culture. My grandpa, Shaltiel Isaac Litevsky from Odessa, left Odessa at age 14. He came to America, eventually settled in North Carolina. Papa would bathe twice a week. I remember that I was a kid, I thought, gosh, that's really funny. Wednesdays and Shabbos, he bathed, okay? When did we develop the idea that bathing every day is a norm? That's only as a function of when you have the luxury of natural resources and an economy which provides those resources. If you travel to certain parts of the world where bathing is not done every day. So it's a whole mindset. So do we wish to take hold of the modern American norm of bathing every day for the sake of a spiritual purpose, or do we want to embrace some other use of water for a spiritual purpose and not merely what we call a modified hygienic purpose?
Right.
Point.
Well, you know,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, right. Mark, did you have a question?
I believe I read where there is a mikvah being built in
Yes, I'm aware of this.
We have to discuss.
Yes,
I believe there is.
yes. And unfortunately, there will be people who will not have access to that mikvah. No, it's not. And it's very disappointing.
I understand that in the Hasidic, they just finished the.
Yeah, that's what we're saying, and it's very disappointing. And I don't want to get into disappointment right now.
Okay.
So, last Aliyah.
Okay.
Here we are. Here, take your talis and just. Thank you.
Baruch hu Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Boed.
Adonai Baruch Olam Boed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bacharbanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah.
Amen. Ve'isha ki zov zov dama yamim rabim. Bloet nidata o ki tezov al nidata ko yimei zov tumata ki medita tiet me'ahi kol mishkav shetish alav ko yimei zova ki mishkav nidata yela kol akli asher teshev alav tameh yek tumat nidata chnagea bam yitma v'chibes v'gadav rachatz b'mayim v'tameh ra'aref v'im tara mezova usorala shiva yamim v'achar titar v'mashmini tikach la shetorim ashnei b'nei yona v'evi ha'otam el ha'kohen el petach l'moed v'so kohen et ha'achad v'chatad v'ha'achad olah v'kiper l'ogen l'bnei Adonai mizov tumato v'hizartem et b'nei Yisrael mitumatam v'lo yamutu b'tumatam b'tamam et mishkani שבתוכם זאת תורת הזהב, אשר תצא ממנו שכבת זרע לטמאה פדבה בנידתה ועזב את זובו לזכר ולנקבה ולאיש אשר ישכב עם טמאה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet hayeh olam notah betochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Take a second one, doctor. יתגדל שמי רבה ומדברי בחייך וביומך ובחייך בישראל בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב במהרה אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וינסה ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה ברכו לילה מקור חצה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה במהרה אמן. In a moment, we're going to ask Toria to join in and sing a beautiful piece, a Mishaberach. But prior to that, we wish to offer the more traditional Mishaberach prayer and mention the names of our loved ones. And I want us to take stock of what it means that when Jewish people gather in prayer, Jewish people stop reading Torah to invoke a prayer directly to God And God is described as the source close to all of our families. And we mention the names of our loved ones within this context. And we'll sing, and Tori will lead us in singing in just a moment. And then we'll study a little bit of Haftarah on Shabbat HaGadol. But just pause, and when your friends outside of Shul ask, what do y'all do? You say, well, we read scroll, which is 2,500 years old in terms of procedure. And this scroll is a fairly young scroll. She's only 250 years old. And she will outlive us all because she has a longevity of another 200 to 300 to 400 years if cared for by our descendants. So we read from a scroll words that are 2,500 years old. And then we say a prayer for our loved ones. And we mention every single person by name. And then we continue on with the more specific prayers in the prayer book. That's what you can tell your friends, because they'll never experience anywhere else, at least not in Mobile. And we say, Mishaber Chavtena, et Yinta Bagisha, Hanasor Peshalea, Armuda Ben Gisha, Alalea Bataviva, Claudia Thomas, Robin Mayer, Miriam Abashi, Spencer Abashi, George Patinos, Wendy Fastman, Tom Bastoni, Avi Moshe Ben Nochana, Billy Singleton, Yaakov Ben Leora, Diane Sizemore, Rivka Bat Kayla, Karnea Chaya Batsari Menu, Lori Davis Curtis, Victor Gunsulin, David Ben Zalman, Tom McCarthy, Nabaronit Bat Aliza, David Shlomo Ben Tovanachim, Anna Moret, Shiravot Bat Sarah, Yaakov Ben Sarimenu, Mara Rachel Bat Miriam, Rivka Bat Litka, Amen. Almighty God, that you have blessed our mothers and our fathers. Remember our loved ones, not only of the ancient days, but our loved ones right now, at this moment, where they are, how they are. Bring forth healing of the body and of the spirit. Share your majestic power of creation, of love, of chen, of grace and compassion, and include Tova Bat Freda, and include all of our loved ones in your sheltering presence. And we all say, Amen. Turia?
Amen. Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. We rise now for Hagbah, lifting and addressing the Torah. Kadeel? Go dress. B'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe levnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die die yeah die die yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 yeah die 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 die. And as we're seated, we turn to page 1298. I wish to study with you just the last few sentences of the Haftorah for today, and then we'll prepare to continue and conclude the service. I wish to look at page 1298 with you in the Chumash. If you have a Tanakh at home, we're in the book of Malachi. In English we say, in Mobile we say Malachi. I love saying that, Malachi. His name is Malachi. It's chapter 3, verses 22 and following. And actually, the problem with translation is that you fall into patterns which are inaccurate, because Malachi is not his name. We don't have a name for this man. We know Isaiah, Yeshayahu. We know Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah. We know Yechezkel, Ezekiel. We know Micah, and Nahum, and Habakkuk, and Zephaniah, and Zechariah. Malachi is not a name. Malach is a Hebrew word. Malach means an emissary. Malachi means my emissary. This is his role. It's his job description. God sends Malachi, God's own emissary, to bring a message. And I think it's telling that we don't have a name associated with this man. This is the very last prophet in the Hebrew tradition. The book of prophecy is called Nevi'im, is closing. And he's the very last prophet. As we say to our friends in Mobile, ain't no more Jewish prophets. This is the one and only. So don't say that hundreds of years later, some other prophet came along to give an update or an addendum, because it's not accurate. Prophecy ends with this man Malachi. Look at the last few lines. It's on page 1298 again, Malachi chapter 3, verses 22 and following. Just 3 sentences. Be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moshe, whom I charged at Chorev. Chorev is a nickname for Sinai. Chorev and Sinai are interchangeable. Be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moshe, whom I charged at Chorev, with laws and rules for all of Israel. We read this Haftorah on this Shabbat because this is the Shabbat just before the holiday of Pesach. And there's a nickname for this Shabbat. The name of this Shabbat is Shabbat Hagadol, the great, the big, the grand Shabbat. Why do we read this passage? I think this might be the reason. 23, I will send the prophet Eliyahu to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. And of course, Eliyahu is arriving in our homes Friday night and Saturday night at the end of Seder. We open the door. Why Eliyahu? Because Eliyahu is the herald of the Mashiach. Eliyahu is the indication that the world as an entirety is going to be better, blessed with justice and law and peace for the entire world. The element of Eliyahu, of Elijah coming into the holiday table of your house, is a generous and giving element, because the origination element of the Pesach Seder is what God did for us as Israel. Very specific. But when Elijah's theme is added to the Pesach experience, Elijah, as the herald of the Mashiach, is now global. Jewish messianism is not only for the people of Israel. The Jewish messianic ideal is that the whole world is going to be safe and secure and at peace. And of course, there are lots more non-Jews than we Jews, but the whole world is going to be benefiting from the Jewish concept of universal justice and peace. And that's wrapped up with Elijah and the Mashiach attached to, you might say symbolically, Elijah. So what's going on here on Pesach, and you know how focused we are on having families come together on the holiday of Passover. Multi-generations come together. Look at this next line. It's going to be an awesome and amazing and incredible day. Verse 24, Elijah's role is he shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I, God, do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. Elijah's role in the reality of the mindset is to bring people together and to help bridge the generation gap. That's the Jewish expression here. That on the holiday of Passover, when we are reliving the idea of leaving slavery behind and becoming free people, we stop and we look at the people at our table. And who's at our table? Typically, family members and friends and people of differing ages. And the message of the book of Malachi is that people of differing ages, v'heshiv levavot, will turn their hearts from this one to this one and from this one to that one. And that we will gain a new insight, the insight of patience, of greater understanding, of pausing to accept somebody who's a little bit different in age and in perspective and in framework. And if you and I do this, says the sentence, which is the last sentence of Hebrew prophecy, then all will be well. But if you and I don't do this, if you and I do not turn to each other at our Pesach table and in life, and pay attention with greater patience and seeking to understand people of differing ages and generations and backgrounds, then what's going to happen? Strike the whole land with utter destruction. In order to fix the entire world, we have to start first with those closest to us, those in our immediate circles, our families, and our close friends. And then we gradually build out more and more. V'heshiv levavot, opening our hearts to people. It doesn't say agreeing. Malachi doesn't say I'm going to agree with everyone and everything. Malachi says I'm going to open my heart and you're going to open your heart. And we're going to open our hearts to each other. Doesn't mean agree, but it means to open one's heart. And I want to make this message very clear. This is the end of Hebrew prophecy. The way that the book of prophecy in the Jewish Bible closes is with that message that every family has to turn itself around. Every community, every group has to turn itself around one person at a time. What could be more prophetic? What could be more inspirational than building an entire world, one person, one nucleus, one family at a time? This is Shabbat HaGadol. This is the message we bring to our table in the next 5-6 days as we prepare for the grandest holiday of all, you might say, redemption from slavery. We turn to our Siddur, and on page 177, a prayer for our country, page 177, a prayer for our country. I ask that you rise, a prayer for the nation on page 177. It's the very last stanza on page 177. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen. The top of page 178, the first line in Hebrew, followed by the paragraph in English for Israel. And especially in these days when we are seeing terror attacks in our beloved homeland, we see our people who are our brothers and our sisters, and they're vulnerable, as we've all seen these past years, more and more civilians becoming ever more vulnerable to hatred and hostility. And there is no good reason. There's no reason. We offer this prayer and many more, and we say, Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Borech et Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Tzmichat Geulatenu. Avinu Shabashamayim, stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. And we return the Torah to the Aron, turning to page now 184. In just a moment, Eitz Chaim, page 184 in a moment, as the Torah is placed in the Aron.
Eitz Chaim מאושר דרכיה דרכנו וכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבנו אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו
And as we're seated, we turn now to page 204. In just a moment, the Ein Keloheinu on page 204, page 204.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michelakeinu, Michemoshienu. Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu,
Baruch Moshiach. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshiach, Atahu Shektiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha Ektoret Hasamim.
Just a few announcements before we rise for the Aleinu, looking ahead a little bit, or reminders. Of course, tonight, Zoom, Havdalah. This is how I first met Turia a couple years ago when Rabbi Scott Kramer of Agudath Israel Eitz Chaim in Montgomery had this great idea of building a community during COVID. And it's been restorative and nurturing. And if you've ever joined in, you've met Turia, you've met Miriam Wyman, a fantastic, beautiful, loving presence as well, also from Auburn, and Rabbi Scott Kramer in Montgomery. Charles Barron is the synagogue in Montgomery's High Holiday Cantor, and he's in Boca Raton. He joins in. Cantor Neil Schwartz is the conservative cantor leading the Reform Temple in Dothan. He joins in. Yehuda, our own Yehuda Silverwolf, joins in, and it's been very meaningful. So Havdalah tonight is at 7:30, and then we're going to take a break because next week is Seder Aleph and Seder Bet, the two Sedarim of it. So the following week, which is 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks from tonight, we'll do Havdalah again, but we're now moving to 8 o'clock because it's getting brighter and brighter, and we make Havdalah near dark, near sundown. So tonight's Havdalah is at 7:30. Skip next week. 2 weeks, Havdalah is going to be at 8 o'clock. And again, we're delighted. We think that we have members of Agudath Israel Eitz Chaim from Montgomery joining in right now. And shout out to y'all, and thanks for joining us. Also, looking ahead, Monday is Tanakh, as usual, at noon on Zoom. Tuesday is Adult Hebrew on Zoom, and the Spirit discussion. And the Spirit discussion at 4 o'clock on Zoom is adding something new to your Seder table. So that's the topic for Spirit discussion. Looking ahead, next week, a week from today, a week from yesterday, is Friday the 15th. Fast of the Firstborn study session is on Zoom. The first email with actual date and schedule went out, and the follow-up emails will go out. So if you are firstborn, you're invited to study on Zoom with us. That's Friday the 15th at 9 a.m. Next Friday, which is Seder night, no services here because people should be at Seder. And next Saturday morning, services are on YouTube only. In person, no, only on YouTube. Saturday morning and Sunday morning services are on YouTube. But frankly, I think people will be expecting to just stay at home because they'll be up late Friday night, Seder night, for Saturday night for those two Sedarim. So YouTube services only next week, Saturday and Sunday morning respectively. And after that, we'll stop because it's enough announcing already, and the bulletin and the email will go out. And I think that's it for now. The Aleinu is on page 205. We rise, page 205. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asana goyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, Mishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim miyoser haaretz Umoshav yekaro b'shamayim mimal ushchinatu zo begavei miromim hu Eloheinu ein od emet malkeinu ebezulato kakatu b'torato yadata yom v'shevota elavavecha Ki Adonai hu Elohim Bashamayim mimal Vial haaretz mitachat enod. Kakatu b'Torah techa Adonai yimloch leolam ba'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yihya Adonai echad U'shema echad. In a moment, those reciting Kaddish are invited to remain standing for Mourner's Kaddish, found in the Siddur on page 207. Page 207. On this Shabbat, we remember with great love Elizabeth Grishman, Leland Manuel Reiner, Roseanne Rips, Fanny Berman, Selma Sokoloff, Dina Barr, Doris Claire Stein, Sarah Mishkin, Dina Rachel Olensky, Bracha Weinstein, Esther Silver, Mayor Perloff, Esther Rubenstein, Martin Reddish, Martha Maisel, Rebecca Maisel, Gertrude Berry Golden. We mark with sadness the recent loss of Kay Podem and Madeline Fass. Are there any other names to mention today? Dov Khan. And perhaps those joining in at home have a name to share as well. Kaddish on page 207. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah be'olma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivarach la'olam olalmei olmaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar, v'yithaleh, v'yithalal, shmei dekudusha, b'richu, la'ela, min kol, birchata, v'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechamata, da'amiran ba'olma, v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama, rabba, min shemaya, v'chayim, olenu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh, shalom, b'mromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. And may all who are marking sorrow and grief and marking your sight know they are loved and their family members are remembered in love and in honor. We'll conclude our service with the Adon Olam, and that will be on page 211, and thereafter, local will be making Kiddush and Hamotzi, and those who wish to join in, we've got Kiddush and Hamotzi here at the table in the Eitz Chaim foyer behind us. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you, Turia, for joining us. Thanks for bringing your voice and your ruach into our Shabbos experience today. It's just been a delight.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Adon Olam on page 211.
I'm going to do a Sephardic melody this morning. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Le'ed Nasa V'chevtzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hove V'hu Yeh
בתפארה. והוא אחד ואין שני, והמשילו להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה. והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בעת צרה. והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא. בידו אפקיד רוחי, בעת אישן ועירה, ועם רוחי גוויתי, אדוני לי ולא אירא. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shkoyach, Shkoyach, Toda Rabah, Turya. Shabbat Shalom to all. And now, Kiddush Motzi. Leo? Excuse me.
V'shanru b'nei Yisrael
Et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת, לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל לא תהיה לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. Okay, this is the day that God has blessed, and we can bring holiness into it. Sabre, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, borei peri hagafen. Hamotzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, hamotzi lehem min haaretz.
Amen. Thank you for joining in. It's great having you here. We appreciate your presence, and we hope that all is well with you in the weeks ahead. May Pesach be a time of delight and of redemption. May you know that you are a blessing. You bring light and love into our world. Leitrot until we see each other soon. Good Shabbos.